Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm so excited. This morning we just passed 500 subscribers, which is insane. So this video I want to talk about how to start a podcast. Especially if you're a beginner, there's a lot of things that you kind of need to know how to do, or just a lot of little tips and tricks that it's kind of hard to find on the internet. So that's what I want to do today, is like talk about all the little tips and tricks that I've learned along the way starting my own podcast. The name of my podcast is Apolitical, and we talk about political, social, and like personal issues. We kind of give advice, we talk about politics, and kind of just make fun of people and what's going on. So we are launching on January 20th. It may or may not be up by the time this video goes up, but I've learned so much along the way from editing, recording, and publishing the podcast, even just like graphic design, stuff like that. And I've kind of had a background in social media. I've been working in social media for, like more than 7 years now, and have a pretty good background in like editing and graphic design. But it's been really interesting to watch it all come together into a show. And so that's what I want to share today. So let's get right into it, shall we? Okay, so the first thing that you're going to need to do when starting a podcast is obviously decide on a topic. Now, I don't want to go too in depth here because you're going to have to come up with this on your own, but you're going to want to pick something that is searchable, relatable, and is something that you're not going to run out of content to talk about. So it could really be about whatever you want. There's all kinds of podcasts. There are podcasts about everything from politics, pop culture, comedy podcasts. It can be whatever you want, but you need to pick kind of a niche and stay within that area. But you don't want to niche down too much, because you want to be able to attract more than just like 20 people to watch it. You want it to be relatable to a large audience, but be a small enough niche that you're able to kind of stay within your lane, but you want there to be enough content for you to talk about. So new topics, new things to discuss, new people to talk about, whatever it might be. So the other thing that you need to decide is kind of what the style of podcasts that you want to have. So do you want to have a co-host style? That's what mine is a co-host style, where you have two people that host it and you kind of have a conversation and talk to each other. Do you want to be the host by yourself and just talk and kind of do like a personal diary kind of thing and just talk about your life or give advice? Or you could do the style where you're the host and you bring on guests. There's so many different options, so you need to kind of decide what style you want to have and then go from there. The other thing to keep in mind with style is the way that you want to organize the podcast. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can either do it kind of like in seasons, or you can just go from episode to episode. Doing seasons is kind of a great way to do it if you want to be more jumping around with your topics. You could do a full season about something and do like 5 episodes in that season, and then do another season kind of about a different topic. So that could be a great way to keep things organized. If you're kind of going to just film within the same niche and just go episode to episode, topic to topic, then that can work really well too. There really is no right or wrong way to do it. There's so many different ways, so many different styles. The other thing that I will say is don't spend too much time on your name. It doesn't really matter what you call it as long as your content is good. Try to pick something that represents kind of what the overarching theme is of the podcast, but don't try to be too technical, and try to make it something that has meaning, but has meaning to more people than just you, because if only you understand it, then when people see it and go to click on, like, they're not going to click on it because they won't know what it is. So make sure that it like kind of describes what's in the podcast without being too broad or too niche. It's a good idea to kind of get an idea of what the vibe and the branding is that you want to have for your podcast. So decide kind of what you think the cover art should look like, come up with kind of a description for your podcast for yourself so that you have a place to go off from that, maybe like a mission statement, because that makes it a lot easier to come up with content and kind of stay on track if you have kind of a mission statement and like what you're trying to do, what you're trying to create, what you're trying to explain to people. Whatever that might look like for you, kind of come up with some branding and definitely create like a list of topics that you can talk about within your niche. So once you've decided on kind of what you want your podcast to be about or what you want it to be, come up with just like brainstorm a list of topics, and all of that will be really helpful when you come up with your branding, because the topics are kind of dictate the vibe of the podcast, which will then dictate what you want the cover art to look like, what you want the music to be like, all the stuff that goes into branding, social media, things like that. So my first tip for branding a podcast, you don't have to have a great big background in graphic design. I think that the way I went about it was a little bit different because I have had so many years of experience with graphic design, but there are so many simple ways to come up with a logo, come up with cover art, which is, for people that don't know, is the like photo that will be displayed on your podcast. So like on Apple Podcasts, when you go to listen to like Melania and Jordan's podcast, As For Me in My House, it has a picture of them and then a logo of the podcast. To create the cover art, you don't really need to spend too much time on this. There are a couple important things to look for because this is besides the name, it's going to be the first thing that kind of attracts people to your podcast if they happen to it on Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts, or if they see just like your logo on your Instagram. It's always really great if you can have a picture of yourself or the hosts, multiple hosts or whatever, in the cover art, because what that does is personalizes it, and right off the bat you let the audience kind of get to know you, see who you are, see who they're going to be listening to. You have to be able to build that personal connection with your audience so that they want to listen to you, and it's going to help build that repertoire so that they understand who you are, kind of where you're coming from, and your vibe. So having your picture on that is super important. The other thing is you have to decide whether you want to have the title of your podcast on it or just like a logo, because the title of your podcast will be like right next to your cover art, but it can definitely help you with branding if it's included. So like for Stefan and I's podcast, we have our picture on the podcast and then we have our logo, but not the full name of the podcast, and then it has our names across the bottom. So there's a couple different ways that you can get that cover art after you've kind of decided what you want and kind of the direction you want to take it. You can use either Photoshop, Adobe Illustrate, or if you're looking for kind of more beginner software, Canva is a great free option, and Over is another great option. I don't know if Over has a website, but they have an app it's like on the App Store. But Canva has an app and a website. Both of those have design templates for logos and podcast cover art, all kinds of stuff to choose from. So you don't want to just like take one of those logos and use them, but it can give you a good place to go off of to kind of help you with your creativity, and it will give you the like right dimensions, all of that. And if you work within one of those two softwares, it's really simple to add text, add layers, do whatever you need to do to create that yourself. Another option is to purchase like a logo or a branding kit from places like Etsy or Creative Market. Or if you're interested, you can always go to the contact form on my website. I'll link that down below. And I do different packages with brand kits, logos, graphic design, websites, even whatever you're kind of looking for. So if you want something more custom, definitely check that out. We can chat about it and see if I can help you out with what you're looking for. But to do it yourself, I think Canva and Over are the best options for someone that doesn't have a ton of experience. Maybe I went about this backwards, was like getting all the before stuff done before I worried about recording. Because once I had a clear vision of what I wanted the podcast to look like and what I wanted the vibe of the podcast to be and the branding, then it made it a lot easier for me to then plan out and record. Once I had everything ready to go, I knew exactly what I was doing, and then I just needed to record. If you want to try recording some stuff first and then kind of see where that takes you, that's perfectly fine, but I'm more of a planner and I wanted to kind of see how everything felt, see how everything went together, and it made it a lot easier to like cohesively record and make things go more seamless. The next thing to check into before you start is how are you going to host and record your podcast. Those kind of go hand in hand because there are a couple of hosting platforms that you can also record on. You can self-host your podcast, publish it yourself, launch it yourself, get it approved through all the major platforms. That's perfectly okay, but that's going to require a little bit more of a technical background where if you're a beginner, you might not have that. So the two kind of top platforms that I've heard about and researched are both Anchor and Launchpad from Podcast One. I'll just kind of break down what each of those are. So Anchor is one that you can record within the platform and edit within the platform if you want to. And you either upload your recorded file or you record it within Anchor. And then the great thing about them is they give you the option to monetize as soon as you start getting listeners. So even if you don't have different brands or companies that are wanting to work with you or promote on your podcast yet, they will match you with partnerships and brand deals and even just have you advertise for them on your podcast. So inserting different advertisements so that you get paid per listen. That makes it really easy if you're wanting to monetize your podcast and you don't have a management team or you don't know how to go about getting sponsors. The other thing is that they do have a lot of copyright-free music and editing tools within their platform that are pretty easy for beginners to work off of. The other great thing about Anchor is that they'll go ahead and do all the approval stuff for you to get your podcast published on things like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever all of the other ones are. So that kind of takes away a lot of the busy work and the hassle. They also have the option for you to get things approved yourself, but then still launch through them. But they do have options to make things really simple so that you can just use them, go through them, and have them kind of do everything for you so that all you have to do is record and edit the way that you want it to be. The other option is Launchpad, and I looked into this and I thought about using it. I was actually going to use Launchpad and then I chose Anchor because I simply just didn't want to go through and do all the approval stuff for like Apple and Spotify myself. I decided it would be a lot easier and it's gonna be a lot quicker to monetize and get that up and running using Anchor. But Launchpad is also really simple to use. You just input all your information. I will say I feel like it gives you a little bit more control over the description and the HTML and the categories that you list in. It has a few more like settings and things behind the scenes that could be really useful. But again, if you really don't have advanced technical background, it might be more than you're wanting to do. But it is pretty simple to use. It's pretty user friendly. I don't know how it is to actually publish the podcast because again, I didn't start using them. I just kind of did the background work and saw what was there. So that's a really great option. The other thing about them is that if your podcast is doing really well, then you can be picked up by Podcast One, which is a big media network that actually owns Launchpad. If you're looking to go more that direction versus self-hosting and monetization, then that could be a really good option for you. Now let's move on to recording. When you are going to record the podcast, this is why it's really great to plan out, or am I going to have a co-host? Am I going to record myself? Am I going to have guests? How am I going to get those guests on the show? It's really good to plan that all out in advance. When it comes to recording, you don't need a big technical studio. You don't really need anything special. I mean, you could have a little microphone from Amazon and record it in the Memos app on your phone and upload it to Anchor. Like, it could be that simple. But you can also go a little bit higher production. What's really popular out there right now is the Blue Yeti microphones. You can get them on Amazon. They're around $100, which isn't super expensive, and but there are definitely cheaper options if you are just kind of trying to dip your toe in the water. But if you're kind of more all in and you want to spend a little bit more money, the Blue Yeti mics are a really great option, and you just like plug those into your laptop to record, and you can record right onto any laptop with those. Beyond that, any editing equipment you might need, again, you can choose to edit within Anchor if you go with them, or you can edit through GarageBand. You can even edit in Final Cut Pro if you're a little bit more advanced. And then as far as recording goes, besides just recording right onto your laptop, if you decide that you want to record remotely with your co-host or record with guests, you can either both record separately and then import those together and edit from there, or there are a few online that allow you to record remotely within kind of the same file, if that makes sense. So it makes it a little bit easier to keep things together. Stefan and I personally, we recorded the first few episodes in person while we were out there in Oregon because we had access to a really nice studio and everything. But from kind of here on, we're both gonna be, unless we're like both in the same place at the same time, we're both gonna be recording remotely. So what you can do is just FaceTime or video call, whatever you want to do, with headphones in, so that you're not picking up that feedback on the audio, and then just both record separately. That way you can talk to each other, see each other, and then not have the quality of the recording compromised. So that still comes out really well. It's a little bit harder to have that chemistry and like vibe with each other over FaceTime as opposed to doing it in person, but it's still absolutely possible. Once you've decided on, cover art, a topic, a name, vibe for the podcast, the style of the podcast, and how you're gonna host it, you're basically ready to go. All you have to do is plan out your episodes. It's important to just really be yourself and try to practice and get as comfortable as you can with recording, because people can absolutely tell when you're not being authentic or when you're being disingenuous. And you don't want that at all. You want to be authentic. You want to make it feel just like a conversation so that people enjoy what you have to say and enjoy listening to you and enjoy being involved in the discussion. So definitely just be yourself, practice recording, practice editing, and you're not gonna feel ready right away. You're not gonna feel prepared at all. I think the number one piece of advice I can give you is to just start, and that goes for anything you want to do. You're never going to feel ready enough. You're never going to feel prepared enough. And so I think this is really a good guideline for how to like lay everything out. But ultimately you have to just get started. You have to just take the first step. You just record the first episode. You don't have to feel pressure to post that first episode, because it's probably not going to be good. It's probably not going to sound good. But make yourself okay with being a beginner, because everyone started there. Joe Rogan started as a beginner, okay? Every single person started from exactly where you are. Just keep in mind that there are a lot of people out there that are probably way less talented and way less skilled than you that are already having successful shows, and the only difference between them and you is that they're already started and you haven't. So the sooner you can just take the first step, get started, just get going, because the longer you wait, the more saturated the market is going to be and the harder it's going to be to get a foothold. I think podcasting is kind of at a point where it started to take off, and we're seeing more and more influencers and YouTubers and people like that starting podcasts that already have an audience. So if you're kind of starting from the beginning or starting from square zero, you need to get going on it. And like I said, just record your first episode. Don't feel pressure to post that first episode. You're probably not going to be comfortable with it. Once you have something that's kind of good enough, you have to post it. You can't just sit on those recordings and not put them out. Remember, comfort is the enemy of progress. So if you're comfortable with what you're doing, you're not working hard enough. So I hope this was really helpful. Make any comments down below that you might have, any questions that I can answer. My Instagram DMs are always open. I get hundreds of DMs a day, but I do try to respond to everybody. I hate those influencers and just Instagram people that just ignore or like delete all their DM requests. I just don't want to be one of those people, because I'm just here to help, and I'm just here to inform and just spread the love, spread the knowledge. So definitely feel free to reach out to me for anything at any time. And if you are at all interested in doing a brand kit or having just a branding session for your brand or for your podcast or Instagram, anything like that, DM me or use the contact form on my website, and I will get back to you as fast as humanly possible. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. I'm going to be posting kind of a week in my life vlogs every week, and then hopefully some like social media growth, personal growth and development, and like mindset content as we go along. Also follow me on Instagram. My handle is at kenda.laney, and you can find me on TikTok at kendalaney. And yeah, definitely check out my own podcast, Apolitical Podcast. It should be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google, anywhere else, anywhere that you get podcasts. So thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.